Hi guys, welcome back to Car Compulsion. Merry Christmas to you all. Apologies, it's been a while since I've had any content out on the channel. COVID, pandemic, all the words you're probably as bored of hearing about as I am do have an impact on getting videos done. But the most important thing is we are here today. We're following up on the initial review of the John Cooper Works, and today we're going to be taking it for a B-road blast, talking about what it's like to drive, how it makes me feel, talking about my ownership experience over the last 6 weeks, likes, dislikes, has it gone back to the dealer, have I had any issues, and we're going to be covering a broad spectrum of things in that discussion today. On a side note guys, I am very close to 500 subscribers. It would be brilliant if you could hit the button if you aren't already subscribed to try and help me reach that number by the start of January. But enough about me standing in front of a car, let's get into driving it. So let's have a quick refresh on the John Cooper Works that I'm in. 3-door hatch variant, 2 litre, 4-cylinder. Headline figures, 231 horsepower, 320 newton meters of torque. Now, my particular car is a manual. A bit of a rarity, I've been told. It does also come in an automatic, which is much more of a preference to the general driving public. I'll talk a little bit about that later because I've driven both the automatic and the manual, and it might surprise you on which one I actually preferred. Some of you guys know I came from an M2 competition. I changed out of the car basically to save a bit of money, very expensive to run, wasn't getting too much use out of it. So I came into the John Cooper Works having come from an exceptionally good, exceptionally fast driver's car. I didn't expect it to stack up completely, and I didn't expect, it to be comparative in lots of ways. And moving forward, what I've seen is there are some similarities in the way that it makes you feel to a certain extent, but that was a very different car, and I think it probably muted some of my expectations around the John Cooper Works. I'm going to start this review off with a bit of a negative, and I'm going to start it with a negative because it may actually impact some of the stuff you potentially might hear on this video. The inside of this car, whilst it looks brilliant, is the most rattly, creaky, screechy thing I have ever had the displeasure to sit in. The dash is constantly creaking. The areas around the doors are creaking. And it's much worse when the car is cold. I'm assuming where the plastic gets a little bit more brittle. But it also, on a B road or any road where there's considerable bumpiness, it really is irritating. And if you can hear any creaks or screeches in the video, just know that it is that. The car comes with 3 different driving modes. You've got Sport for maximum sporty feel, increases throttle response, everything becomes a little bit more stiffer and a bit more hardcore. And it actually adds an blipping auto rev matching feature that's actually quite nice if you don't really want to heel and toe, or you can't. It has a mid mode, which is kind of just, your everyday mode that you cruise along in, and, tend to find myself using that mode a fair bit when I'm on the commute. And then it has a green mode, which I haven't really used at all. I know that it gives you the little functionality there that enables you to track your miles per gallon and how many kind of overall miles you're saving and whatnot, but it isn't really a mode that I tend to use very much. Yeah, it's pretty quick. It's a quick car. I wouldn't go as far to say potentially, it's a super fast car. And I don't think it's being marketed as such either. 231 brake horsepower, reasonable amount of torque. It will light up the front wheels in anything but ultra dry conditions, and even in dry conditions it still lights up the front wheels in second. I think I've even had it spin the front wheels in third. It puts the power down nicely overall though. I would say that It is particularly punchy in the lower end of the rev range. There isn't really too much point in revving it out to the red line because you've kind of had the most out of that 2 litre 4-cylinder by that point. But it pulls nicely. It doesn't give you the punch in the back of your seat that other cars do. But again, partially down to power figures. But it's a nice power deliver. It's quite linear, it's quite smooth. And ultimately, it gets the job done. If you want to overtake, if you want to have a blast, the power's there for you. Little bit of turbo lag, but nothing to write home about. I've driven both the manual, well, now I have the manual, and I've also driven the automatic variant of the John Cooper Works 3-door hatch. I opted for the manual because I felt at the time that it would give me more of a connection, and it would be more of sort of a driver's option. Straight out the bat, and addressing the elephant in the room, I don't like the manual gearbox on this John Cooper Works. And actually, my sort of 1 or 2 weeks that I had the demo car with the automatic, I actually found it more fun to drive than this manual. And I'll tell you why. One of the reasons actually had me take the car back to Mini. The first to second, and sometimes the second to third change in this car is actually, I feel, quite poor. It adds like a juddery sensation, and it doesn't matter how you control the car or how you control the clutch or whether you're going fast or whether you're going moderate speed or slow, there seems to be this snatchy, jumpy feel between first and second gear, and I really don't like it. And I took it into Mini for them to have a look at it, and they told me that they experienced the same sensation that I was experiencing. They had a couple of other people drive it, but told me that they'd also had a similar experience in other John Cooper Works, and that it was a characteristic of the car. And I found this really hard to swallow because it's not a very pleasurable characteristic. And I'd be interested to know if any of you other guys that have manual JCWs have had this problem. But the gearbox isn't quite mechanical enough. It's okay, it's not fantastic or amazing. And if I put it up and compare it against, say, the gearbox in my Civic Type R, there is no comparison at all. This is just not anywhere near as good, and it doesn't really offer that real mechanical feel. Noise wise, let's give you a little test. Car sounds okay. Some of it's artificially pumped in, as it always is, but from outside the car it sounds pretty good. Need to keep in mind that my particular car is fitted with the particulate filters. The EU regulations make it a little bit less noisy than it was in the old variant of John Cooper Works. There's no pops or bangs at the moment outside the exhaust, but it does have a nice deep sporty tone in the sport setting. You can probably hear that for some of the drive-by clips that I'll do in this video, but it isn't obnoxious. Not sure that's necessarily a bad thing. It's okay. It's not setting the world on fire. What's the steering like then? What's the handling like? Well, in true Mini fashion, this is probably my favourite part of the whole car. Very, very fun to drive, very, very good on twisties, holds the road nicely, can sometimes be a little unsettled, I think would be a fair way to describe it, depending how hard you're pushing on. This car only has the passive sports springs on it. You can get it with dampers, this doesn't have it. The ride can be a little busy at times, is the best way I would describe it. It can tramline a little from time to time. It can be a little bit of torque steer from time to time, and sometimes it can feel unsettled, but for the majority of the time it is a blast to drive around corners. It does hug the road nicely. There's very little body roll. The control is good, and it does put a smile on your face, which I suppose is, you know, a lot of why people buy a hot Mini, right? On that note, when we talk about handling and steering feel, on my experience of BMWs, and I've had quite a number of them, is that sometimes BMW have this trait of, and I know this is technically not a BMW, it's a Mini, but technically it is, they tend to have this kind of dead, kind of non-pronounced steering issue where you kind of jiggle the steering wheel around and it moves a lot and the car will move, but it's not quite as precise as maybe you would find in an equivalent hot hatch. When you find the right piece of road, the car will put a smile on your face. It's wet out at the moment, You know, it's not ideal conditions. This is a lovely piece of road we're going down at the moment. Really good for a good spirited drive. You know, I feel comfortable. It's holding its own. Yeah, it's a little skittery. Yeah, it's a little squirmy under braking. But all in all, the car holds its own nicely. It makes you smile. Does make you, you know, there's an element of concentration that you need to have. But it makes you smile. A point worth covering and mentioning is miles per gallon. MPG in this car is very good. Maybe it seems a lot better to me coming from the M2 competition, which absolutely annihilated petrol like it was going out of fashion. But I find myself filling this up not much at all. It's got a small tank with something like V-Power or Momentum, probably costing me about sort of 42 pounds to fill it up. I'm averaging, or can average on a run, anywhere towards 40 mpg, and on a spirited drive that will dip to high 20s. When I first picked up the car and I sat in it, I wasn't a huge fan of the seats. I think I mentioned it in my initial review. I found them to be very, very hard, albeit they are quite supportive, and they are actually, yeah, they hold you in place when you're going for a spirited drive. In the car's defense, over the last sort of 1,000 miles or so, they have actually softened up a little bit, and they're a lot actually more comfortable than they were. They're still not on the levels of some of the seats that I have. The Civic Type R, for example, very, very comfortable seats, but they're definitely better than they were. So where I found myself with this car is a real mixed bag. There's a lot to like. It's fun, the engine's nice, puts its power down nicely, it's quick enough for real world conditions, probably matched quite well with the weight of the car. You know, yes, I didn't get on too well with this particular 6-speed manual. It's okay, it's nice in normal driving, it's got a couple of quirky issues, but it isn't anything to write home about. It's also a bit squeaky in here. You know, there's a lot of scratchy plastics around, but overall it's a nice interior and it differs from its rivals. So I'm kind of on the fence about this one. Like I mentioned, it is going to go. It hasn't blown me away, but I don't think it's a bad car. I can see why people fall in love with them. I'm just not sure that, like I said, this model is the right one for me. Thank you for joining me, guys, on another drive summary. Not the car for me, this particular one. Still a great car, really fun. I can see why people love them, just personal preference. The manual box didn't really work for me in the car, wasn't hugely blown away. The car itself is very, very fun to drive. It's a great, nimble, fun little thing. I think the Clubman John Cooper Works is going to lean itself more towards what I'm looking for at the moment. But I can see why people love these cars. Join in for future videos to check out that Clubman if I do pick it up, and to talk about more cars in general. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button. Have a great day.